All right, well, let's talk about the next lie.
Oh, boy.
We got the story from the New York Post. Boston social justice activist and husband scammed at least $185,000 from donors, so saith the feds. They're being hit with, I think it's 18 different charges, federal charges. They say a high-profile social justice activist in Boston and her husband used a nonprofit they founded to scam at least $185,000 from donors who included a Black Lives Matter chapter and the local DA's office. Whoa. Federal authorities alleged Monica Cannon Grant and Clark Grant allegedly treated their Violence in Boston organization as a personal piggy bank to pay for rent, shopping sprees, delivery meals, visits to a nail salon, summer vacation trip to Maryland. I heard that they were going to Bubblegum Shrimp. That was one of the things that was heavily reported. They're going to mention the following year, she was named Best Social Justice Advocate by Boston Magazine and one of the Boston Globe's Bostonians of the Year. When will people stop falling for this stuff? Should we run through the list again? Should we run through the list? The Trayvon Martin story. Mm-hmm. What was the initial report? That a white guy saw a black kid and then attacked him and killed him, shot him. What really happened? Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman got into a fight. Mm-hmm. Maybe Zimmerman was in the wrong for confronting him. He was a neighborhood watch and Trayvon Martin was walking behind houses. Trayvon Martin had him in a ground pound position where he was on top of him and pummeling him. And then George Zimmerman shot him in the chest and killed him. Zimmerman's Hispanic. We also have Michael Brown. Hands up, don't shoot. That was a lie.
That was total lie.
Total lie.
Also, remember with the Trayvon case, NBC actually deceptively edited the phone call in order to make it sound like Zimmerman was describing Trayvon Martin as being up to no good because he was quote unquote black. They asked him, what does he look like? He says he looks like he's up to no good. He's wearing a black hoodie, something along those lines. And they cut it together to say he looks like he's up to no good, black.
Well, the other thing is the whole thing was a sham with Trayvon Martin. The picture that you saw everywhere was him when he was like 11 or 12.
Right.
And he was much, much older and much, much bigger. They made it out like George Zimmerman beat up like a 12-year-old little punk kid. And he was much older than that.
Jussie Smollett.
Mm-hmm.
Lie.
Gosh, yeah.
Ahmaud Arbery's story. He was just jogging. That was a lie. It's just every single day there's a new lie. And these people, they're Rittenhouse.
Yeah, the whole thing, the entire thing was that, he crossed state lines and he shouldn't have that gun. As soon as I saw the story, it was very obvious to me, and I think everyone who saw it, that this was a case of self-defense. But then they started muddying the waters by saying he had broken gun laws or crossed state lines, and maybe he was looking for trouble. But not only could none of that be substantiated, I'm pretty sure they just made all of it up because it was so obvious that this kid was defending himself. And then what ends up happening is people go, well, because they've muddied the waters, now we have to wait for more answers before we can really be sure and take a side, and the story loses momentum.
At a certain point, I just, I every few months I say something where I'm just like, it's all the same thing every day.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. We wake up, we have a new story, because I've been talking about these stories and criticizing the hoaxes going on 7 or so years now, a little bit longer, but doing the actual YouTube stuff and the podcast stuff. And at a certain point, I'm kind of just like, what's the point of saying it if it doesn't change anything?
No. I think that's the wrong mentality. I wouldn't lose hope. There are a lot of people. You're seeing the complete decentralization of how people get their information. I was going through like a lot of your episodes before coming on, and it's absolutely beautiful. 450,000 people, I mean, for the last few episodes, watch your show.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. And
plus clips and live viewership isn't counted in that number. So
exactly. And the thing is, what you're doing is exactly right. You are giving so many people the information that they need, and you don't need to get 100% of the people. You don't even need 50%. You need a solid 10 to 25% of Americans that are getting solid information, because those are the people that are going to go talk to their family and friends and make sure that they know the information. There's like 10 to 25% of Americans are just helpless. They're zombies. Then like there's this 50% in the middle that are actually persuadable. And then there's like us, right? Like that are on the front lines, activist types. I think you're actually doing the Lord's work here, and I wouldn't lose hope. I think there's a lot to be optimistic
maybe
about.
that's it. Maybe what needs to happen is we're growing, we're building infrastructure, we're expanding, we're doing new shows, we're getting a new headquarters, and then I guess what really happens is in 10 or 15 years these cable networks won't exist anymore.
Exactly.
You know what's crazy? And this is no dig. I'm a big fan of It's Always Sunny, but I heard that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia had a new season out. How many you guys have heard of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? Yeah. It's now the longest running live action comedy series, I guess. So how many viewers do you think this show got on their seventh season on average? How many people watched one episode? What would
At
you
the
get?
premiere? Yeah, I'm not
No,
sure.
not the premiere. Just like throughout the season on average. How many people do you think watched an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
I'm going to pretend I'm not Googling it, and then...
No,
Google
Google it. Just tell me what you think.
500,000.
DuckDuckGo.
So it was about I think the premiere episode of season 7 was like 2 million.
Wow.
And then they would get like 1.3 to 1.5 million per episode. How many people do you think watch now?
50,000.
300.
300,000.
200 to 300,000 per episode. I'm not digging on them. I'm a fan. I think It's Always Sunny is funny. I don't really watch it for the most part. I think what happens is, we've launched a couple other shows. We have The Vlog. We have Chicken City. We have Pop Culture Crisis. And I'm wondering if there's just cultural swings in terms of what people are interested in. And sitcoms have just, there's too many options. So people are watching a bunch of different shows. And also, back when this show was at its peak, we didn't have this plethora of content and we didn't have this plethora of streaming services. So what's happening is it's not so much that people don't like the show, it's that over time people start using technology and they start absorbing information in different ways. So the reason I bring this up is that I think it's entirely possible and likely that within 10 or 15 years, CNN just has nothing and they're gone. And then it doesn't matter that people believe them because there's nothing to believe anymore. They don't exist.
Right.
However, 10 years after that, this show will be outdated with limited viewership and people will be in the metaverse or who knows where.
It's all going to be Shimcast, baby.
All Shimcast.
That's all
That's
anyone's going to watch.
You plug your brain right into the Neuralink and then Shim speaks directly into your mind.
That's right.
I think what's going to end up happening too, unfortunately, and people are going to have to be vigilant about this, is, as you have mentioned, it's very easy to covertly fund people online. So I think there are going to be a lot of people who want to promote the establishment narrative who are going to be very well funded by people from within the establishment who traditionally would have just given their money to CNN or placed advertisements on their network.
You see it, you see it on YouTube, the favorite channels. They're trying to prop up CNN, so much to perpetuate all these lies. Are you guys familiar with Defiant L's?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think
good.
it was Defiant L's who had this. It was so what they do is they show a tweet from someone and then they show a follow up, which is like failure.
Yeah.
And it was like Brian Stelter talking about, we can't just trust the cops on this Jussie Smollett thing. We got to hear it out. And the next one is like Jussie Smollett sentenced to 100 days in jail for hate crime hoax. And it's just like, you shouldn't be listening to people who are. I'll tell you this. I can give him credit for being a bit skeptical for sure. But it's like at some point you kind of just say like, we know, or we should err on the side of that was BS.
Yeah, well, the skepticism only ever runs in one direction. Every single time we hear an accusation of racial hatred, we're told if we don't buy into it hook, line, and sinker, it's because we actually just hate black people and not that we want more evidence before we jump to a conclusion.
Yeah.
But
Black
when it
Lives
runs in the
Matter.
other direction, when it's a BLM activist or Jussie Smollett hoaxing or doing something illegal or corrupt, well, then we need to stop and wait for the evidence and make sure that we have all the facts straight before we comment.
I can think of one time there was a mass campaign with racist vandalism. It was carried out by a bunch of young white men. It was when those white supremacists put up those flyers everywhere saying it's okay to be white.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which it is
Horrifying.
not. It is not.
Apparently.
It is not. Disavow.
Disavow.
Apparently, that's the message they're sending. It was brilliant trolling, So, for those
Exactly.
unfamiliar, I think most people know this. It was a white sheet of paper, and it just said, it's okay to be white. And people would put the sticker on a pole, and they'd be like, you're a white supremacist. And they're like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
This is an interesting discussion I had with some of my friends. And I just want to ask you guys, do you identify as white?
Me?
No.
I don't.
No, I
But everybody knows
Catholic,
I'm
man.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
more
Catholic.
Catholic than anything. Yeah.
But actually, everybody knows the meme that I have second generation mixed race family, so we don't have that. That's like, I guess there are people that are, but the idea is, it's interesting. The left says, see, the reason you don't is because you live in a world full of white people, so your default.
Yeah.
Why would you identify with what everyone else is?
But this is the problem with that analysis. Firstly, it's entirely uncritical. It's not actually looking at specific ethnic backgrounds. So Irish people and other ethnicities, which were generally more Catholic, as a matter of fact, such as the Irish, the Italians, the Polish, were not considered white, even though we had white skin. So I see whiteness, quote unquote, as an identity which has often been used to exclude Catholics.
Well,
It's not something I identify with.
That's partially what the left critical race theorists argue, that whiteness is a political term and always has been because there were white people who weren't white, and they actually argue now Eastern Europeans aren't white. Like Luke Rutkowski, blonde hair, blue eyes, they say is a person of color.
Is not white. Well, here's the issue. In the United States, we have a very unique racial history as a result of slavery. Black people, unfortunately, lost a lot of their ethnic identity because they were brought over here forcibly and were not able to retain the information on what part of Africa they came from specifically. And I think that's become rejected onto people who we call white now, even though they would have considered themselves Irish, Polish, Italian, Dutch when they came over here. They're thrown into an analogous category of white, even though they're more or less identifying or had identified until much more recently with their ethnic identity rather than their racial identity.
Yeah. This is exactly but this is one of the arguments from the left, that the reason why, there's no issue with black pride or power is because they don't have an ethnic identity, they have a racial identity because of what you just described.
Yeah.
Whereas for a white person, you could say you're proud of being Irish or Scottish or Ukrainian, but not white.
Yeah, but there's this kind of Montanelli fallacy which they engage in, where they will try to say things like, we're only against white privilege in a system that places you on a pedestal simply because of your skin color. We're not actually talking about your skin color specifically, but then how do they identify you? Well, by your skin color, and they'll go after you and say you're bad because you're white. So even though I don't identify as white.
You want to talk about white privilege, Justice Millett.
Yeah.
If whiteness is political, then a millionaire celebrity who is propped up by the media and defended when he commits a hoax, and then still has activists getting his back. Now that's some kind of privilege. And at what point, if whiteness is political, at what point would black people become politically white? So it's a serious question.
No, it's a good question. Well, I mean, they will call black conservative activists white supremacists.
Right.
I mean, literally, white just means bad and black means good. That's how they use these terms.
Yeah, no, and then you have the other thing where they're redefining all of these terms. Like the ADL came out and defined racism, right, as the support of systemic racism. Like they use the same words to define it, which is always a really bad sign.
Yes.
But basically, the only way you can be anti-racist or against racism is to support Marxism.
Yep,
right?
100%.
That's part of the plan.
The ADL changed the definition of racism to be about something like racial dominance or something like that, and then had to change it again like a week later and apologize because something happened in like a Jewish community, and they were like, oh, maybe we should have thought about what we were claiming, because people started saying you couldn't be racist against Jewish people or something like that, and then all of a sudden the ADL was like, we better revert our definition.
They should talk to Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh yeah,
my gosh.
Yeah, she knows all. Apparently, they used to arrest people like Tucker Carlson and Tulsi Gabbard for, pushing propaganda, which is not true. She made,
That whole Whoopi Goldberg scandal got just memory hold. Like it's like it never even happened.
Oh right,
that's
what it was, right?
Ender, right?
The ADL, that's what happened.
Yeah. For anyone
she
else,
came out. That was
ender.
amazing. She said that wasn't racist. That was just white people, with white people. And then the ADL realized, like, this whiteness definition of racism is really backfiring on, like the Jewish community.
Yep.
Maybe they shouldn't have tried playing the woke game, and then they realized they had to change it back.
By the way, I saw a hysterical tweet. Someone called them, the ADL, the Anti-Definition League.
Oh yeah,
that was fantastic.
That's good.
Thought that was fantastic.
Very clever.
Yeah.
Very clever.
But I'll also say, too, it's always funny when people will define racism as systemic racism specifically because, you lose the ability to analyze racism at the level of individual behavior rather than just looking at it systemically. But on top of that, you mentioned using definitions or using the actual word you're defining within the definition. This is the first thing you are taught in any etymology class. If you want to define a word, you cannot use that word in the definition.
Exactly.
So I don't know if I mentioned this on the show about the black card revoked. We talked about that, right?
Maybe.
The black card revoked. We went to I think we were in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Was it Altoona? Maybe not. Yeah, I think it was. I don't know. Anyway, we're at an Airbnb, and they had a bunch of board games. They had a pack of cards, and it was called Black Card Revoked.
Huh.
Yeah, we talked about this with Gothics.
Oh yeah.
And
that's right.
It was a card game that was supposed to be, if it was for black people to play, and it was about black culture, and it asked questions like, what movie does every black person have in their collection? And I thought it was racist, and I'm like, man, But hey, far be it for me. It was made and marketed by black people for black people. So there you go. I guess I don't know if it's racist or not. If these things are held by to be true by them. But one of the questions was, if quote unquote they give reparations, what should they give? And I was like, why is they in quotes?
That's
They in
weird.
quotes is a reference to Jewish people.
Right.
Because when you're referring to authorities of any power, you just say they or them. When it's put in quotes, it's a specific reference to Jewish people. And so I saw that and I was like, that's kind of weird. And look, I think maybe the people who made this game are anti-Semites, and it's possible because they have ties to high profile politicians. We're looking at that story. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. But we know that there's a lot of prominent Black Lives Matter activists that are deeply anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
We saw this with the Women's March. These individuals were forced to resign because they were pushing insane conspiracy theories about the Jewish people.
Yeah, well, look, if you tell people that anytime a group of people is successful, it's because they're stealing something from you, they're going to look at every successful group of people and say they're stealing something from us. I don't know why anyone thought that would start and end with white people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I can't stand the the general anti-Semitic anti-Semitism in general is annoying to me because it's the same CRT argument. A privileged group of people dominate. I'm like, get out of here, dude. I know there are CEOs of big companies and in media who are not of a particular ethnic background. It can be anybody who works hard and succeeds. It's weird that people are like, I notice there's a whole lot of one group of people in this industry that proves it, and I'm like, dude, that's a privilege argument. That's ridiculous argument. I'm not playing that game.
Well, and if I have friends who are Orthodox Jews, and the reason that they have influence and that they are successful is because they have such a strong community. Like their
Family.
community, it's family,
Yep.
it's their friends. Like they are so tight knit. Like they help pay for each other's kids tuition at school. I wish that Catholics had a community similar to that.
Yeah.
Because it's so strong and it's admirable. Really, for a lot of
We're
reasons.
getting there, honestly, though. I'm seeing it
That's
a lot
right.
of places with Catholics.
Yeah.
The annoying thing to me about the anti-Semitism, be it from BLM or from white supremacist groups or whatever, it's like right now in New York, we've had this ongoing problem where Hasidic Jews are being chased down and brutally beaten. And I'm just like, where is the great power structure to intervene and tell the police to actually deal with this hate that's happening on the streets? But they don't. Why? Because the people who run New York also are deeply anti-Semitic.
Right.
So, I mean, it's like, it's not Bill de Blasio anymore, but that dude is a far leftist who probably held all of these same insane beliefs. And so this idea that one group has privilege over the others, sometimes some groups do, but I think the real issue is merit. Merit, drive, and a little bit of luck sprinkled on top. Chance favors the prepared. But for the most part, if you are smart and you work really, really hard, you'll become successful. But ultimately, we've talked about this before when it comes to why you see a high propensity of successful Jewish individuals. Could it be family? We know that family is a key indicator of success, regardless of your religious background. As you were saying with the Catholics and
but family is everything, right? Like Lydia and I were talking about this before the show. Family is why you get a job. Family is why you go to work. Family is why you love your country and why you go to war and you're willing to die in it so that your kids and your grandkids can have a good life. Like family drives everything. And it's like the social science on this is so boring because it's so predictable, right? Like kids raised in a loving household with parents that take them to church on Sunday are always the best performing group. They commit less crime. They don't commit suicide. They don't get addicted to drugs. It's all very boring and it's all basic. And the Jewish community is really figured that out.
Are you familiar with the blue zones?
No.
It's where there's 7 areas of the planet where people have a life expectancy that exceeds 100, or where there's the highest propensity towards having people live over 100. And so some researchers went to these areas to figure out what do they have in common that may contribute to people living to be over 100. And there's some interesting things, like they eat only till they're about 85% full. They don't overeat. But one of the most interesting things is they all have a job. So they talked to this one, he's a Japanese guy, and he's 102, and he's chopping wood. And they're like, why are you doing this? Shouldn't you be relaxing and be retired? And he's like, well, if I don't do it, who will? Someone's got to get the wood. and it was for his community and for his family. Community and family was another big part of it.
Yep.
They're very close-knit and tight-knit families and communities. And the reason he had to chop the wood was because he needed to make sure everybody had this available, and if he didn't, no one else would.
Yep.
I was also reading that the highest, like the biggest spike in when deaths occur is right after retirement.
Yeah.
So I think people need to understand how important purpose is in a human's life. Without purpose, people become dejected, depressed, and violent, like we see with so many young people these days. And with purpose, we see a lot of people living to be over 100 years old.
Yep, that's right. And actually, there's a lot of studies that have come out over the last few decades that show the benefits of not just like having children, like for your mental health, like down the road, but like super old people, when they're around their grandkids a lot, their cognitive ability, like they can like reverse parts of dementia and erosion in the brain. It's really cool stuff. And it's I think you're right. It's about duty. It's about responsibility. It's about purpose. Because when you lose that, like so many people when they retire, my great grandmother lived to be 95, and she didn't really start to fall apart until she got out of her daily routine.
Yeah.
She used to go to the library. She went to 2 Goodwill stores, a thrift store and the Goodwill. She went to all the grocery stores, clipped the coupons. As soon as she stopped doing that, she just kind of fell apart.
Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. You've got a finite amount of energy in a certain area and resources for a life form, be it human or otherwise. And so what happens if there is a group of people or a group of animals and several of them stop producing for the rest of their herd? It's a strain on the herd. And so then what happens is it stands to reason that life evolves duty and purpose. Because those who have a sense of duty and purpose to each other are more likely to survive, more likely to have kids, and thus those traits are carried on into the future with us. Thus, family and community are extremely important. The other interesting thing, too, is I think purpose. You have to have a reason to do things, to be alive. Otherwise, we're facing the rat utopia experiment, in my opinion. Are you familiar? We've mentioned it several times and recently. This is where they put a bunch of rats in a unlimited food, unlimited water, but finite space. What happens when you don't have to fight for food? What happens when you don't have to do any work?
You're lazy.
It's not just that. They found what they called behavioral sink. Behavior started to break down. Cannibalism emerged. Some rats would just groom themselves incessantly and never do anything.
Wow.
They would engage in strange behaviors. And if they took one of the rats out of the utopia and put it with a regular population, its ideas would persist and spread. So without purpose and without struggle, humans become, likely, in my opinion, will become broken, and unhealthy.
Yeah.
Things fall apart.
And I would say, even beyond the sort of more materialistic Darwinian analysis, we can just say that human beings have deep spiritual needs. There's something about us that's very mysterious and difficult to understand. And when we're not contributing to something that we understand is greater than ourselves, we do start to fall apart.
Yeah, absolutely. You need that drive. We've looked into this actually a lot on the economic side of things, and the funny thing is like you would think that having kids and getting married would put you further back in terms of how much money you're making. It's actually not true. And there's this weird thing. A lot of experts think that when you have children, it's actually a bigger motivator to get a better job, invest more in your business so you can provide better. But it's overall, like when you have to struggle, you have to cut the fat, right? You have to become more efficient, and it just keeps you on your toes. And family, I think, helps drive that. Community helps drive that.
For a lot of people, they have no purpose, and I think if you look at the millennial generation, I wonder what it could be. Well, there's two things: no religion, no kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then what do they live for? For people who a long time ago, I'm not saying this to say that people should be religious, but certainly without religion, we can see people become listless. We used to have, people had faith. They had community. So religion served several purposes. You would go to church, and that meant you were with your community. You were communicating with each other. You were sort of synchronizing a lot of ways. It was a chance for the people who lived next to each other to talk about what was affecting them. So that was important.
Yep.
We don't have that anymore. People don't even talk to their neighbors anymore.
It's really weird.
It is.
When I was growing up, I was always with my neighbors. Like they weren't, and they all went to different churches, right? I mean, some of my friends went to the same church as me, but like we had a neighborhood gang. We would literally ride our bikes around. We built forts, like, and we knew all the other neighbors, even if they didn't have kids, and they would talk to us and hang
Parties.
out. Yeah,
Block parties, barbecues.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Especially in New York, man. You go to New York and you live on top of somebody you never met him. That's the weirdest thing to me.
Yeah.
Every apartment I've ever had, I'm in New York City. I was living off of Myrtle and Nostrand. And there were people my age behind me, below me, and above me. And it's like, why don't I know who they are?
No,
we could probably
exactly
play
what you mean.
Xbox
Yeah.
together and order pizza if I just talked to the guy. Never did.
Yeah.
Just never happens.
Yeah, in a very strange way, the internet has actually alienated us from our own actual location. There's been something wonderful about the fact that it's given us access to people who are nowhere near us, but you stop forming social connections with the people who are right next to you.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.